Welcome to the I Am Pausing podcast. I'm your host, Hannah, sitting down with leaders and experts at the forefront of performance and well-being. Join me for conversations about the science of rest, the cost of burnout, and the truth about real success. Settle in with a cup of tea and let's pause together. So, if you spent any time in tech, in SaaS, you know the type of leader who talks about psychological safety in a deck and then makes their team feel anything but safe in the room. Dave Mahoney is not that. He spent his career in some of the most target-driven companies in the industry, from sales leadership at Google, head of SMB at Uber, first GTM hire at Toast internationally, and the list goes on. But somewhere along the way, he decided that the actual work was the people, not just the pipeline. And so now he runs SoundBoard, a coaching for go-to-market leaders. And this, Dave, welcome to the show. I am so happy to have you here.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Delighted to be here.
Amazing. So I really want to get into it today. We've talked a little bit just now about the journey, the titles, the companies, but I know from our conversation so far that there's a lot underneath that for you. So the pull towards coaching, was there a specific person who coached or mentored you well, who inspired this shift?
Yeah, there was a few, right? So I suppose if we start with, over the past couple of years, the term or practice of coaching has become particularly important to me and what I do. But my experience of being coached started way back when. So if I kind of start with like what my definition of what coaching is and, who helped play that role of bringing it to life for me, mine would be facilitating positive change by improving thinking, right? And to me, that is starting with the thinking of the person who is being coached, not the person who is doing the coaching. And so my current coach is probably the person who comes to mind, and I'll share a little bit more about her. I've got a session with her as soon as this afternoon on something I'm thinking through at the moment, but we've worked together since 2018. I kind myself very fortunate to have worked with a company like Google, started in Google 15, 16 years ago. And I suppose I first encountered coaching there with some of the programs and training that you get as part of that organization. We had a Google sales coaching program. And I think that started for me kind of like what that made me learn was the power of great questions, right? But it's actually really difficult. What I learned over the years is really difficult to embed an actual coaching culture, like really embedded coaching culture, right? I mean, oftentimes it's even difficult to embed a feedback culture, which is before a coaching culture. So for me, to answer the question around who did I most learn from in terms of kind of coaching, it was actually when I moved to Australia. I remember sessions with our managing director at the time where we would go to, important meetings, either client meetings or internal meetings, and he would very consistently, after any meeting, pull you for 5 minutes, whether it's you or a group of folks, and just ask questions, right? And do it in a way that over time, everyone knew what the purpose of that became, right? It wasn't for him to scold you for a meeting or for him to even have, he would always drop a particular observation from his perspective in there. But really it was to understand like, what is it that you took from that meeting in terms of what you learned, right? So to me, that's probably where I first learned the power of coaching, if you get me. And then I met in 2018, I met my now coach. And that was probably the first time where I experienced true coaching. And what I mean by that is there is no bias in, for the best will of the world, in any organization that you're in, there's going to be conscious or unconscious bias about what's best for that organization. And that is okay, right? That is okay. I first experienced executive style coaching. I met 2 or 3 coaches as a part of my own leadership development journey. And my now coach had been in the industry that I've been in, connected well with her, and just created a safe space where she listened, asked me questions, and I found myself articulating things about what I felt, where I wanted to go that I never had previously. And so that was kind of my first experience of receiving kind of, I would say, real coaching that I would now define it as.
So powerful. And you mentioned the move to Australia. So that's a big move. What was going on for you in your life at that time that made you want to make that big change? Tell me a little bit about that period of time.
To be honest with you, an opportunity just came up. I was in Google in Dublin. I had been going out with my now wife for maybe 6 to 9 months, who was also in the same company as me. And a colleague who I used to work with, they were expanding the team over in Australia. And a colleague who I'd done some work with was like, "We're growing. Would you like to join?" With which I said no, because I think there's this girl that I like in in Ireland, if I'm being honest. And anyway, long story short, won't bore you with, but I ended up kind of sharing with her that the opportunity was there, and then she was interested in just going for it, and so reached back out to him, and both of us ended up moving to Australia, and what had planned to be a year or two ended up being almost 7.
Oh, so I love that she was just up for it as well. And how was that? How was moving to the other side of the world and taking on a new role?
It was all of the things. It was, I mean, in terms, I suppose, some things stayed consistent in terms of I was in the same company, right? Like selling the same product. And so, and like the move was made smooth by the support of the company. It was Google at the time. And so like there was a lot of privilege and support there, if you get me, in terms of not having to feel like you're taking this big risk of you might not land a job or etc. But to be honest, it was tricky as well in terms of you have to go and make friends for the first time in a long time and go and kind of live in another country. And in particular, family is a huge important value of mine. And so being that far away from family I found incredibly difficult, particularly during COVID, which ultimately kind of sparked our decision to move back. But it was an incredible experience, but not without its challenges.
Yeah, I can imagine. Time difference, the distance. And so, yeah, tell me more about that. What made you want to move back, and how was that COVID time for you?
It's funny how, the years kind of just went by in terms of an opportunity might come professionally, or we were enjoying our life out there. We made friends out there. And when COVID came, I just remember being onto my family back home and my wife being onto her family back home, and us just kind of it was quite easy to put moving back onto the long finger, like we'll move next year, or we'll go in a couple of years. But when it came to it, and when we kind of felt a sense of longing to move back and be closer to family. So it's kind of when we kind of made the decision. We actually ended up staying in Australia for a good 6 to 12 months after, because Ireland was in lockdown. But that's when we started to kind of plot our move back to Europe.
Yeah. Wow. Had a lot of these roles, as we mentioned earlier, but this shift towards coaching, what was this a kind of sudden realization that you wanted to change, or was this something gradual over time?
A seed was planted when I was in Australia. So around the time that we decided to move back to Ireland, I remember it was July 2020. I handed in my notice to Uber. I gave Uber 6-month notice until December 2020. There was nothing kind of interesting back in Ireland role wise. We toyed with the idea of moving to London, but ended up deciding to move back to Ireland. And come December, I'd kind of assumed, okay, we'll land a role and we'll move back within 6 months. But come December, Ireland was back in lockdown. Nothing interesting kind of role-wise had come up. And it was actually, when I was leaving Uber, our GM at the time, of APAC at the time, mentioned to me, our head of sales in Japan has just left. I hear you're still knocking about Australia. Would you be interested in something short-term, right? And what felt like a kind of a small thing at the time, in hindsight now, probably was the start of me going down the path I am now. And the reason for that is because I ended up doing 2 roles over the course of the next 9 to 12 months in Uber. That was a contract role where I kind of had to set up a business myself to contract out to Uber and do a kind of an interim role, right? But while I was doing that, that kind of gave me the space, different time zones, etc. It gave me the space to do the coaching training. I found myself asking my coach where she had done her training, because I found her really good at what she did. And I found myself curious about just, if you go and learn about coaching, at the very minimum, it's going to be helpful for you as you lead more teams into the future, right? So I found myself with that extra kind of time and space that I had, doing that coaching training, which was with the Neuro Leadership Institute, a kind of a neuroscience-based coaching. And with that, you have to 100 hours of coaching to become certified. And I found myself coaching folks who I had been leading teams of previously. So a lot of the teams that I'd led are SMB, 25 to 35-year-olds and large teams. And so I found myself kind of like, I suppose, practicing on that profile of person, right? I'd also kind of brought in a coaching focused leadership development program in Uber that was kind of designed to retain top talent. And I think both of those things, I just get so much energy from. I just get so much energy from someone who has a high ceiling, is willing to look inward, is open-minded and coachable. And I just enjoyed that work so much. I wasn't sure what role it would play in my life moving forward, but that idea, kind of had the idea for SoundBoard kind of come up then. It was after my role at Toast, about 2.5 years later, that myself and my now business partner, Emer, kind of brought it to life. But I think that's kind of where the idea initially kind of came from. The seed was planted, which is different, I should say, which is very different to the path that I had been going down or where I thought I wanted to go.
Yeah, because, similar to me, we worked in these high pressure environments, right? And that age group that you were just describing, say like 25 to 30, I can remember when I was in my mid-20s, working in New York, working in sales, like I didn't have a coach. I actually didn't have a coach until about 6 years ago or so. Oh my gosh, if I was not looking inwards, I was running for the target, completely burning myself out. If I wasn't working, I was getting up at 4 a.m., getting into the office, and after work, going for drinks. And it was just this constant chasing for me for something external, for that validation, that worthiness I can see now. At the time, I had no idea. And I feel like I moved through my career through different versions of the same pattern of like high performance and burnout and burnout in work, burnout in personal relationships, and just these crashes, which, thinking back now, if I had had someone who had been on a journey and would sit with me and ask me really good questions when I was 25, my life and my career might have looked quite a bit different. So like, how was it for you? And like, when you were in these high pressure environments, was there a part where the pressure ever really got to you?
Yeah, for sure. I think so there's a couple of things there. Like, what I would say is like that point around validation. Like, I mean, if I look at the kind of early parts of my career, like I remember joining Google in 2010. And it wasn't a sales organization at the time, it was a services organization, and just being surrounded by, I remember someone sitting next to me had just finished an internship in NASA, and just remember feeling like, oh my God, like I do not deserve to be here, and like and then we kind of moved to a sales organization, and relatively good at it, enjoyed customers, targets, etc. I kind of found my groove, if you get me. But I suspect the next few years of my career was kind of like seeking that validation, or there was a lot of that involved in it, right? The next promotion, the next pay increase, the next title, the next move, etc. And like, to a degree, there's nothing wrong with that, because it helps you, it can help you get a solid foundation financially, career-wise, etc. It's almost like coaching for me helped me pull myself out of the environment that I was in and ask myself, what are you thinking now in this chapter of where you are? Mm-hmm. And I just have since, whether that's someone who is your coach in whatever area in life, or just like friends, colleagues, people you trust to just challenge your thinking on things, it's such a helpful thing to have someone to ask you questions to help you figure out what is it I want now and why, what serves me now and why, right? And so to your question around kind of the pressure getting to me, like the time that immediately comes to my mind is in COVID, like the month of April, May 2020. I was in Uber at the time leading the SMB Australia, New Zealand team. Like prior to COVID, or like, early 2020, it was probably the most kind of like energized I'd ever felt in my career. Like we had a business was going well. We had a leadership team in seat who were great. There was kind of like things were moving like, in the right direction, right? And then COVID happened, and it meant all of the restaurants in Australia and New Zealand all of a sudden needed to have a digital presence, right? So there was this influx of customers, which in theory is amazing because it means more business. In reality, it meant you had a team of 80 people working from home, many of whom were young, who were working in house chairs. It meant that our operational metrics had blown up. It meant that, back to my point around family, it meant I was kind of like, so much going on in the world and uncertainty at the time, that it meant that a lot of my mind was on what's going on back home, etc. And so, like, I just remember at that moment that I was kind of feeling, and I distinctly remember hosting an all hands at the time, and our enablement lead, Anne Marie, a wonderful relationship with her, would always tell me if there was something she observed. I remember her saying to me afterwards, she was like, Dave, the team want to hear from you, right? And it taught me a bit about myself in terms of uncertainty or how pressure affects me, right? My style, leadership wise, is to kind of connect with people, in person. Yeah, connect with the team, right? And build trust, etc. At that moment, I think I was just over preparing, right? And I was probably robotic in my approach in that all hands. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see when there is so much going on externally, if that makes sense.
100%. Yeah. Your brain was like here, there, and everywhere. There's so much going on in the world, in family, in the business. And it's really easy to go into that protective mode, right? That protective mode of overthinking, over preparing, and it's because probably your nervous system, your body is just in overdrive, and that level of stress that's been kind of accumulated from this pressure. Do you remember at that time what that felt like in your body?
Good question. This was probably a few weeks period, but I remember like walking on the beach with Kira, my wife, and feeling just like drained, It taught me that kind of piece of feedback was really helpful, because if someone else sharing out loud to you who knows what you can be like when you're at your best, not showing up in that way or to that standard, was a really helpful reference point for me to kind of probably have a bit more self-awareness, if that makes sense, and kind of like look for things as to how it did show up in myself. So I definitely felt myself being the battery just being low, basically. And it's helped me look out for it a little bit more. You obviously learn a little bit more about yourself and your body and your awareness of when you are you're never going to be 100% all the time, but it's just like kind of catching yourself when your tank is getting empty and what you need in order to be more at your best.
Yeah, such a good point. And this topic that you're bringing up of authenticity, right? Giving ourselves permission to be our authentic selves at work. Maybe if you're working in an environment that, like for me, the environments that I was working in were not aligned with my authenticity, right? I was working in male-dominated teams, super high pressure. The way that the team bonded and socialized was not how I would choose to do it. And at that time, I felt like I was wearing a mask because I felt like I had to just fit in. And that wearing a mask, that kind of pretending to be someone that I wasn't, be someone that I thought everybody else wanted me to be, that was so draining. And I just remember feeling constantly tired, heavy, waking up in the morning after a full night's sleep, still exhausted, right? This kind of apathy for things that I used to enjoy, like seeing my friends, this twitch in my eye that just didn't go away. And it's like it creeps up on you, right? Because it becomes this new normal. And when I look back now, and things that I would say to my 25-year-old self more than, 10 years later now, I would say, be your authentic, weird self, invite the team to do yoga and breath work, even though that's not something that they want to do. Because actually, if I had done that, everyone would have probably loved it.
Yeah.
And and there is a power in that. And that's why I think coaching is so powerful, right? To have someone external to you just give you those little nudges and encourage you to be ultimately more you. I just think there's nothing more powerful than that.
I mean, you raised some really interesting points there, right? There's kind of like, there's authenticity and having the courage to be you, the weird you, etc., and all the wonderful things that come with being you, right? And there's obviously, particularly in large organizations, there's complex cultures, microcultures, et cetera, right? And like, it's easier said than done early in your career. And, you know, you could argue there's situations where you need to be kind of thoughtful in how you do show up, of course, also, right? But like, for me, just as you're sharing that, like, for me in Uber, I really felt I had the freedom to express myself from a leadership perspective. And sometimes you need enough of a lease to be able to do that. We used to have a Friday wrap with the full team. And I can't remember the full context of what it was around Movember. We were doing a fundraiser around Movember. And I shared with the team, I was hesitant to do it at the time. And I had over questioned it. I wouldn't have gone there probably. But I shared with the team, Movember, for anyone who may not be aware, is in service of mental health. And you know, I shared the story, and we had 3 or 4 other folks in the team who came and shared their stories. And that was a moment for me where I was kind of like, if you feel something in your gut to go somewhere with something, like, do it. I could feel the team, or a number of the team, just kind of being with me or following, if you get me. And so like, there's so many times where things can come up where you'll question to say, is that the right thing to do? Is that too risky thing to do? And I think it's right to, I mean, it's good to let that sit and kind of say, is this the right thing for me to do in this moment? But if your gut is telling you yes, right? And if you're only not doing it, whatever that topic is or thing is, or, you know, try to go and do it. And if you feel like it won't be accepted, try to find somewhere else that you feel that quirkiness will be accepted to do it.
Oh, wow. What an incredible thing that you did there. And it just shows how, you know, it just takes one person to start, right? Someone just needs to jump in first with that vulnerability, with that, like, I feel this, I'm just gonna say this. And then the ripple effect of that on those other people being made to feel seen, right? To feel not alone in what they're doing. And Brené Brown talks about this. Vulnerability is our greatest measure of courage, because it's bloody scary. And the collective level of courage in a team, aka vulnerability, is actually the biggest predictor of its success. Because what we're doing is we're bringing back that humanness to life. And I always say, like, I would way rather, especially in this age of AI, where you don't know if this video or whatever it is that you're watching is actually a real human being or not, I would rather listen to someone stumble, say something a little bit weird, maybe say something a tad, like, you know, unpolished, verging on, you know, not appropriate for the situation, the culture. I would way rather hear that, because I get it, right? I relate. Someone's up there on a podium talking and their voice is trembling. I used to feel so embarrassed when that was me, but now I try and embrace it, because I've realized that people come up to me afterwards and they're like, I really loved that you kind of stumbled and lost your words and then you kept going, because it makes me feel that if you can do that, I can do that too.
100%. Emer and my, when we launched SoundBoard last year, we created a kind of a launch video, right? And the video that did the best was the outtakes that we had from it, which was basically us messing up, right? People want to see they don't want to see, and wearing a corporate mask. Like, it's one of the things that we say in SoundBoard. It's not just coaching is part of it, but also advice. We have an advisory offering and a community. And in the community, when we meet up 8 times a year to discuss certain topics, both personally and professionally. We ask people to remove the corporate mask, if at all possible. And it's about like trying to create a space of, you know, you started with kind of psychological safety, and that's how you show up yourselves. And it's the space you create. And it's the common, I suppose, sharing of what's okay, or what you ask of people within that space. So we ask for confidentiality. We ask for folks to remove their corporate mask if they can. And it's actually been incredible to hear some of the things that people will come with and share. Like, we've had folks sharing in the room, you know, that they're thinking of leaving their corporate role to start their own business in a group of folks that they felt, you know, before making that decision, close enough to share that with. And so that's the feeling or kind of culture we're looking at to build. And as a fully understand that so many people will need to, for whatever reasons, be at a certain stage in their career in a company that might not tick every single box for them or most of the boxes for them, right? So I think it's important to call out everyone's financial situation is different, everyone's trajectory is different, and pragmatism, is an important part of that as well. But I would say, like, one of the things that sparked SoundBoard as well is when I'd mentioned I was leading the Japan team for a few months, and I read the book Ikigai. I don't know if you've come across it, beforehand, and I found it quite inspiring. And it's like, it's about these 4 areas of being that can lead to a fulfilling life, right? Do what you're good at, do what's good for the world, do what you're passionate about and what makes you money, right? And like, I certainly wouldn't say to someone, just go and follow your passion and go do that thing or when they're 25, because that might not be possible, right? But what I would say is, like, as you move through the different stages of your life, or as you get more and more experience, etc., the closer you can get to those things, if you can take steps towards that. Clearly you've taken a big step towards that with what you're doing now, right? It feels really good to do that. And so it's a balance.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that framework of Ikigai. It's something that's inspired me. So do you feel like you found your Ikigai now?
SoundBoard is my baby. It's our baby. Yes.
Yes.
Like I kind of mentioned earlier that, the start of my career was kind of around, I suppose, climbing the corporate ladder and things that come with that, right? I then, around the time that I was kind of moving back to my Uber experience and moving back to Ireland and joining Toast, where, my primary motivator was around, like, learning how to lead organizations, right? And I thought I wanted to become a CRO. I thought that's the path that I wanted to go down. And now the things that are most important to me, or the things that drive me, are waking up every day to be working on a mission that I'm unapologetically love, and don't get me wrong, there are plenty of challenges that come with it. SoundBoard has become kind of a life mission for me, but equally, probably what I wasn't expecting as much is the autonomy and the flexibility of doing what I'm doing now gives me the opportunity to be with loved ones when I need to be with loved ones, and don't have to feel like I have a conflict of something that comes down on me from a company, right? Or from things out of my controls.
What I was taking from what you just said was you have found your Ikigai because you're able to help people and get that sense of doing good in the world, but also, like, not just in work through SoundBoard, but also showing up for family members when they really need you.
Yeah.
And being able to serve sort of in that way as well, especially every family goes through challenging times.
Yeah, I do think I have found, certainly in a place where I'm closest to that definition of Ikigai. I absolutely love that the work that we're doing, and nothing gives me more energy than seeing someone progress in whatever definition of success they have, while also having the opportunity to spend time with my newborn or spend time with family members when it is needed to. I mean, it's not come without sacrifices, previously in my career in order to be in a position to do this, but I absolutely love the work that we're doing, and it feels like an absolute joy to be building what we're building.
And I just think that's so beautiful and so inspirational and so real, because all of us want to go and do good in the world and, have more energy and more free time to do the things that we feel important, show up for our families, our children. But I think you raise a really, really good point. Like, for many out there right now, it's a really tough market.
Yes.
I know that myself at 25, I couldn't have taken that risk sensibly. So I think it's really important to share this as well. It's not about just going and quitting tomorrow and trying to do something that does good. Like, it's important to have a plan and think it through.
Well, I could not agree more. For anyone listening to this who is in, early in their careers, and a lot of our members in SoundBoard are, that those ages of 25 to 35, I would not, give that advice of just go follow your passion, right? Like, there's always a, yes. And that's why I kind of find the Ikigai reference, but as a stepping stone, and kind of trying to build that over time, as you said, with a plan in mind, that can change also, right? Which is why kind of coaching and surrounding yourself with people who will kind of help challenge you what that plan is and why, and support that plan is so important, because sometimes you really need the strength and the conviction to go and find it and to go and pursue whatever your plan is on paper. Like when I had the idea of SoundBoard in my mind, I basically reached out to a good probably 8 to 10 people in my network who I knew and trusted and valued their input, right? And so we literally, when it was just an idea in my mind, we got in a room and I shared the vision, the idea, and they helped me pull it apart and they supported it. And I think that having that group of people helped give me, and putting it out there, saying it out loud, socializing it, helped me push forward with something that what I thought was good on paper gave me the strength to go and pursue it.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, 100%. Yeah, the only point that I'd maybe bring a small challenge on is that it doesn't come, that line that you said of it doesn't come without sacrifice. Because I think that for me, there was a lot of sacrifice. There was a lot of just pushing through, never pausing, sacrificing my personal life for this sense of achievement, for earning more and more, and just being on that treadmill, where actually now, if I was to say something to that younger version of me, I would say just pause, just step back every once in a while and have a look at your life, have a look at your savings, your bank balance, and probably at a certain point it was enough.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't need to keep going, but I did. I kept relentlessly going until I couldn't, until my body, until something broke in my life. And so I think, there's always sacrifice in life, but the extent to which you sacrifice yourself, I think, is really important to keep in mind.
So I could not agree more with that. I think both can be true. And I think for sacrifice, but to what end, right?
Yeah.
And but that point of checking your savings, etc. So for me, when I moved to Australia, became very good friends with an ex-colleague from Google who is now still one of my closest friends to date. And he was far more transparent, open, and done a lot more thinking around things like, what is my net wealth? And why do I want my net wealth to be what it is? Ultimately, what's the vision for my life, right? Which is a big question. But to me, when I kind of refer to sacrifice, if you do want certain things that will require, money, etc., to get there in service of those things, sometimes questioning how big you want that to be and how much sacrifice you're willing to put into getting there, I think is a very good question to ask, right? And something I've done a lot of asking on over the last number of years. But checking, am I just pursuing the next thing, or how intentional is what I am doing in order to create the life that I want? So yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. And I think we've seen that reflected now more and more in the general culture. Topics like the FIRE, financial independence, retire early. I feel like that's been around for a while now. And it was the whole Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week. Let's just go, go, go so that we can then stop. And more recently, and for me, in my thinking anyway, I've been but that was when I didn't like what I was doing for work, right? That was when I wanted to just completely stop. And so I had to go really fast and really hard and then stop. And actually, there's this other movement now, COAST, which is more, I can't even remember what the acronym stands for, but as I understand it, it's more about, having a big enough bedrock that you can just do something that you love that, just covers your expenses, because you've already got the property or you've already got the investments that over time are going to even out. And having that view of that has really enabled me. When I was training as a yoga teacher at 34 years old, I had so much fear. I was like, how am I ever going to be able to make a life out of this, the type of life that I want? When I look at how much yoga teachers get paid and I look at how much I used to spend when I, worked in tech. And actually, fast forward now, some years later, I've found a way to have my Ikigai of doing good in the world, serving people, earning a decent amount of money, but to be completely frank, nowhere near what I used to earn.
Yeah.
But actually that's because I don't need it right at this stage. So I think just being smart with how we think about things and having that like longer term view is really important.
I love it. Like, I mean, I'm sure this has been shared many times, but like when when the title increases or the pay increase, your spending increases with it. And I certainly had that in my time in the tech world also, but I also just think taking an interest or bringing things like your spending, like learning about things like investing, whether that's ETFs or whether it's individual, how you invest is down to your own risk tolerance, your own approach, etc. But like understanding the power of compounding and saving each month and finding a way to become excited or energized by saving and investing can give you the freedom to not have to earn or keep earning at the level that you're in if you're in a corporate role. So yeah.
I just love the perspective that you bring and the work that you're doing now, because when I was in my 20s working really, really hard, if I had had access to SoundBoard, the coaches, the events, all of the offering that you're building that you have, I think my life would have been very different. And what an incredible thing to be able to offer. Yeah, tell me about a moment where you watch someone move from this feeling of stuckness to see them thrive.
Yeah, so around the time that I mentioned, I was kind of going down the coaching path and, working with folks who were kind of intros from people I'd worked with previously. Was working with someone who was moving from Australia back to Ireland, and they came to the conversations with the premise that they were going to move from the sales role that they were in back into a sales role in that same tech organization in Dublin. And they were coming with almost a level of a feeling of resignation that was going to be the path. When we dug further, actually what energized them or the path that they wanted to go down was into a strategy and operations role. And when we kind of dug deeper into why they weren't pursuing that strategy and operations role, two things came up. One was their manager actually gave them a steer around not joining that particular team, right? Because of some of his biases. And secondly, their own limiting beliefs about whether they could land that role themselves, right? And I share that with you because it resonated with me at the time in terms of sometimes we can take someone's who we admire and trust. We can take their perspective so heavily on board that we may not actually pursue the thing that might be right for us. And so she, in that, over the course of working together for 6 months, actually came to the conclusion that actually the strategy and operations role is what I want. And she went and pursued that, and she went and has done an amazing job at that. All I did, or all the coach does, is create the space for that to happen. But it's such a good, and it's why we have so many multiple inputs as advisors into the role of the advisor, is to give a bias opinion, because that's based off of your view on the world, right? And that's good. But that's why we aim to have multiple perspectives to help shape someone's thinking rather than taking just one on board. Thank you.
I think that's so important. Yeah, because we all have a bias, and that bias is based on how we grew up, how we were raised, what gender we are, what color our skin is, and what preferences and interests we have. I think it's a really fundamental approach that you're taking there with SoundBoard to have this diversity of opinions, because we're not all the same. And if I just look to one or two people and just copy or follow what they're saying or doing, that might not actually reflect, coming back to our earlier topic, of that authentic version of me. So I need multiple mirrors. I need multiple voices, a path.
Yeah, and so often people can have a mentor, one or two mentors that they go to, and their intent can be pure, right? And can be what's the best for that person. But it's all of these beliefs and biases and perspectives beneath that you have to find out for yourself. But having multiple perspectives is always a good idea for big decisions, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. And I think sometimes we can get stuck as well. I definitely did. I saw, it wasn't a coach, but it was a therapist. I saw the same therapist every week for 5 years. And I, now looking back, 2 years was probably enough because this therapist helped me reflect on my childhood and have a better understanding of why the patterns and behaviors that were manifesting in my life today existed. But what they did not help me do was actually challenge me and help me let go of those patterns. I just had this awareness and this understanding, but I was still doing things that I didn't want to be doing and that weren't serving me. And it was only when I actually switched to a coach, who my therapist was female, right? She was very nurturing and comforting, and I needed that energy at that time. But then I worked with a male coach who really pushed me and really challenged me and showed me a different version of things. And that changed my life. And
I love
since
that.
then, I've now changed. I change coaches and therapists and mentors every so often. And I feel like the good ones will prompt you to do that. They'll push you, right? And I know when I work with folks, I work over a short period of time and then I mandate a break. And for some of them, they don't want a break, right? Because they're getting kind of attached to my support. I want like a little baby duckling. I'm like, you need to go out in the world and like fumble and like do this yourself, because otherwise, like you said, you could just be staying stuck.
I love that for two reasons. Like, one is the distinction between therapy and coaching. Like, therapy looking backwards is so important, but at some point moving forwards becomes the priority, right? And that's the kind of, I suppose, the roles that both therapy and coaching can play. And then secondly, 100% in terms of sometimes a fresh relationship perspective can be really, really helpful. Like in SoundBoard, we say to both coaches, our coaches and members, that like, number one, if the connection isn't there, that's absolutely fine, right? Like we'll place you with another coach. But secondly, after the membership year, you may want to shift up who you're working with. And that's absolutely fine also. And is actually a really good thing. So love that.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Dave, there has been so many juicy nuggets that we've gone through today. And I just think everything that you're doing is so inspirational, how you live your life, how you show up in your business. So thank you. And we do have a closing question on this podcast. So if you could put one message about well-being on a billboard for every workplace to see, what would it say?
About well-being.
Or about anything in general. You've got a whole billboard.
Learn, add value, have fun.
Learn, add value, have fun. What a great 3 rules to live by.
Yeah, I got some advice back in my time at Google to kind of ask yourself those 3 questions regularly. Am I learning? Am I having value? Am I having fun? They're rarely going to be a 10 out of 10 all of the time. But if you see over a relatively consistent period of time, decent period of time, that one has fallen off, you might want to ask yourself, do I need a change? The 3 things I would have on.
Nice. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Dave. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Anna. See you soon.